Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
Good afternoon, Team Krulak community. My name is Major Ian Brown. I'm the Operations Officer at the Krulak Center for Innovation and Creativity. And on behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center, welcome back to the Brewcast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. Before we begin, please remember that all opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, the United States Marine Corps, or any agency of the U.S. government. So today, the Krulak Center is happy to talk about a project that makes all of us as Marines very happy, which is talking about amphibious warfare and going back to our amphibious roots. We have here with us several contributors to the new book, Uncontested Shores, The Evolving Role of Amphibious Operations in the History of Warfare, which was just released by our friends on campus at the Marine Corps University Press. This book highlights the changes and continuities in this style of warfare, examining historical amphibious operations and possible future operations, as well as highlighting lesser-known case studies and providing new assessments on more famous campaigns like Gallipoli and Tarawa. We're lucky to have four of the contributors to this volume here today, who I will now introduce. So first, we'll introduce the co-editors, Tim Heck and Brett Friedman. Tim Heck is an artillery officer currently serving with the 6th Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. He was commissioned in 2005 and did tours in Iraq and Afghanistan prior to transitioning to the reserves in 2009. Since joining the reserves, he's been with 4th and 6th Anglico, the Marine Corps Embassy Security Group, and Special Operations Command. He'll be joining the Marine Corps History Division in April as a reservist. As a civilian, he's had a variety of jobs around the world, including working for the Department of State and the International School of Kuala Lumpur. He's currently a freelance editor and writer. Our second co-editor is Brett Friedman, who is a writer on strategic theory and military affairs and senior editor at the Strategy Bridge website. He's the author of On Tactics, A Theory of Victory in Battle, and the forthcoming On Operations, Operational Art, and Military Disciplines, which I believe are both Naval Institute Press, and also author of numerous articles and chapters. He's a major in the Marine Corps Reserve with the 6th Anglico as well. And so we also have two chapter authors with us today. First, we have Ellen A. Ahlness, who is a PhD candidate in political science at the University of Washington and an FALS fellow at Inuktitut, a graduate of Northern Arctic Federal University's Russia and Arctic program in Archangelsk, Russia. She has also participated in the Pathways program at the U.S. Department of State's International Security Office. Her recent work comprises research on Arctic governance and organizational development, with particular interest in the collaborations between circumpolar indigenous nations and Arctic nation states. And our final contributor with us today is Sulakshana Komerath, who is a graduate of the University of St. Andrews and has a master's from the London School of Economics. She has been a civilian analyst with the Department of the Navy since 2009, and her work is focused largely on irregular warfare and counterterrorism issues in the Middle East. As an analyst, she deployed to the region in support of naval special warfare. Currently, she is a Middle East policy advisor at the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So that is a lot of very impressive resumes that we have on board with us today. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to join us on the Brewcast, and we look forward to talking here about the book and how you put it together and the issues that you covered. So to get things going, as we have Tim and Brett, and I've got a presentation here I'm going to pull up. But for our audience, the first thing we kind of wanted to go into was what the genesis was for this project, and how you went about finding your contributors and figuring out what topics you were going to cover.
So, like all good things, we're going to do a little bit of the origin story. So, there's Grogu and myself at the Marine Corps Ball in 2006. Brett and I went to PLC Seniors together in 2004. We're in adjacent companies or adjoining companies at TBS. Went to Fort Sill together, went to Camp Lejeune together. We've known each other now for going on 17 years. The book itself came out of a text message. I was doing research on what was supposed to be a chapter for this book. It'll be in the possible next volume. And I couldn't find anything. And I just messaged Brett. And I was like, hey, man, do you want to do a book on amphibious operations? And I got a response back that was a profanity followed by the word yes. And that was the start of it. Um, so, we started there, and we started by reaching out to folks we knew. We went to folks we'd gone to Command and Staff College with, or Joint Forces Staff College in my case. We reached out to some other authors. Brett at the time was a known and is a known entity in the military writing community. Nobody knows me. And so kind of leveraged his name on Mill Twitter, and then put it out a call for paper or a call for chapters, which got us the 2 contributors that are with us today. And most of the rest of them in the book. We went through Twitter, the NatSec Girl Squad, H-War, and then we went to the McMullen Naval History Symposium at the Naval Academy to round out those last few chapters and to find a lot of our peer reviewers. So it started out of a text message and then became this academic project. Brett, what did I miss other than the fact that I'm still better looking than you?
Yeah, like Tim said, it was his idea. I was working on a variety of other projects at the time, and it just sounded like, and not only one that was needed, but it figured how hard could it be based on my static answer. We did run into some roadblocks based on that and mistaken impression, and it wouldn't be that difficult to put this together. But we were fortunate that a lot of our contributors had done things like this before, both edited on their own books and contributed chapters, and gave us a lot of really great advice and mentorship on how to put it together. So that we were lucky that happened, and when we went through it, our major goal was not just to produce a book, but to kind of move the conversation outside of the Marine Corps a little bit, because Marines talking amongst Marines about amphibious warfare, like, yeah, okay, that's great, but who else is out there who can contribute? And that's why we were really happy we found people like Ellen and Sue to lend their insights and help us out in kind of expanding the conversation a little bit beyond, well, the Marine Corps has done a lot of great things in history. And I think, that was the goal, and I think we largely succeeded in putting something together.
Yeah, we didn't want this to be rah Tarawa. We've done those schools, we've read those books, and they're great, but we definitely wanted to move the conversation forward. And that's why the open call for chapters that we did was so fantastic, because I think of the 20 plus chapters in the book, Brett and I were probably familiar at a working level with maybe 6 of them. And then the rest required a lot of additional resources and a lot of additional work. And Sue and Ellen, I think, probably suffered from that lack of familiarity on our part as editors, as reviewers. But it was a really good learning opportunity for us, and it allowed us then to go out and find peer reviewers to get involved in the project too. And I think that added to the scholarship and hopefully for the academic value of the book as well. So yeah, the next slide, a quick literature review. So the book you're going to see on the far left, The Assault from the Sea, was kind of the last major academic treatise on amphibious warfare in this version, or in this form, right? Multiple essays. And Merrill Bartlett's book is fantastic. It is a cornerstone, but it hadn't been done in 20 years. And, it came out in the early 90s. So, we're looking at 25, 26 years now. And it was a collection of essays that had been published elsewhere. And we talked about possibly compiling the best out of the Marine Corps Gazette or the best out of proceedings or something like that. And then we just said, no, let's do our own scholarship. Let's work on our own project. The middle book you see there is a British government publication. Tristan Lovering put that together, and it's fantastic, but it's not an academic tone. And then Jeremy Black's over on the right. He is just a prolific writer and scholar. And it came out kind of as we were developing this book, or we'd already started on our project. And it's a broad survey history of amphib and airborne operations. So that's what this book came out of, kind of all 3 of those things, and with a stronger academic desire to make this valuable. BJ Armstrong at the Naval Academy was the one that said, hey, are you guys going to do double-blind peer review? It's going to be helpful for folks going up for tenure, and we certainly hope we did that process at BJ's recommendation, and that's when the folks at MCU Press really stepped up and helped us find reviewers, and I think increased the academic rigor of the book significantly. So we started this project in the fall of 18. And at the same time, the Marine Corps was starting its return to the sea look, which we toyed with about 10 years ago when we said we're leaving Afghanistan and then stayed. It's like your parents' house. You can never really move out. But the Commandant talks about it in his force design that came out in the last year. And it's, I'm not going to read it to you, but the Commandant's not convinced that what we've done in the past we're going to be able to do in the future. And so how does that look? How does that change? And what does the nation need out of its Marine Corps? Brett said we didn't want this to be a book by Marines for Marines about Marines, but it's who we are. It's embossed on our thinking and our thought processes. And as a result, I think that probably bleeds into how we frame the book, the chapters we accepted, the chapters we decided not to take. But again, the goal is to give, whoever's in that room at the Pentagon, at Headquarters Marine Corps, at 2-6, at, first MLG, whatever it is. Well, don't want to leave the wing out, or at a wing unit. Something to dig into and to get a sense of options from the past, ideas for the future, to help figure out how to take the Marine Corps and go back to ships, go back to sea, go back to islands, to be what the nation requires.
Yeah, and I think it was actually pretty serendipitous because at the same time we were realizing, like, in the scholarship, there's a lot of focus on the amphibious assault, and almost in any amphibious assault in history, you can find a book or something on it. But when it comes to amphibious withdrawals, amphibious raids, other forms of amphibious operations, there's less out there. And I think at the same time, it seems that General Berger looked at the Marine Corps and said, we're optimized for the amphibious assault, but not so much the other forms and the amphibious operations, and we need to diversify. And so we got lucky that there seems to be a groundswell around this idea that we need to expand our capabilities beyond just the amphibious.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Bartlett's book, it's assault from the sea. It's not withdrawal or raid from the sea. It's amphibious assault is in the title, and we were clear we didn't want that. So we wanted to be broad and to cover all 5 types, and I think we did. And again, Ellen and Sue were key contributors in that vision. So we've mentioned it. We didn't start this for Marines, by Marines, about Marines. But if Brett, you want to cover the Brits, and I'll cover the Aussies.
Yeah, so we put up here some of the other concepts that people have been looking at, not just the United States Marine Corps. The Royal Marine Corps has looked at what they call the Black Swan concept, which is kind of diversifying the platforms that Royal Marines will operate from. They were looking at a small sloop of war sized vessel that would be designed to get smaller teams of Marines around the battle space and from ship to shore. It's very similar to the light amphibious warship, although I believe the one the Navy and the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps, are looking at quite a bit larger than the one that the Royal Marines looked at. Don't believe they followed through on this concept, but it was part of the milieu of amphibious operations of this groundswell I mentioned, of looking at other forms, other ways of doing things than just massing your combat power offshore and pushing them onto the beach as fast as possible on large scales. And
the one on the right there is from the Australian Royal United Services Institute of New South. So the Royal United Service Institute of New South Wales. So not all of Australia, but just a state down there. And so back in 2014, right, Australia is a sea power like we are. They're a close ally, and they're looking at it too. And when we look at the new Navy's, the light amphibious warship concepts, one of the ones we're looking at is from Australia. And so, we're not the only ones out there thinking island chains, contested seas, gray zone, kind of all of those buzzwords, freedoms of navigation. Our allies and partners are too, and we hope that this book helps for them to clarify some things and expand their understanding as well. All right. Since we have published, actually not since we started the project, 3 fantastic books, all conveniently focused around one of the best known amphibious assaults, the Normandy invasion, have come out. Thomas Mitchell's Winds, Wave, and Warriors, which covers meteorology and surf proceedings, right? So the niche and nuanced studies of amphibious operations continue, right? Stephen Keffer's book on the building of the staff and the planning for Overlord is a really, really fantastic study, especially, if you're thinking about sitting at a MEF or an ARG staff or somewhere on the MEU. We're field grade officers. We think like staff officers now because that's what we are. And that's how you build a team. That's how you plan. That's how you do the OPTs. And then getting onto the beach is one thing. But Bork talks about what happens after you've established that beachhead and what happened in France, especially with the interactions with the civilian population. All of these, again, are focused around the assault, that people think of, Normandy, Saving Private Ryan, the whole nine. And those are the books that continue to be released. You haven't seen a book on Sea Angel or even an amphibious evacuation of Hung Nam or something like that. So, again, the literature is skewed heavily for the assault, and we hope this book balances some of that. But these are 3 good books. If folks want to get a little deeper into some of the nuanced areas that precede and follow an amphibious operation. Leave you with 2 thoughts. Little Heart, which everybody refers to about something. And I don't know how true this quote is, right? He releases this quote in the 1970s. Amphibious flexibility is the greatest strategic asset that a sea-based power possesses. This is obviously the era before computers or meaningful computers before the internet. So is it still true? I think the Commandant in his planning guidance and the force design thing has said, we are still wed to a 1960s style concept of high diddle straight up the middle, that over the beach assault. So maybe this isn't the greatest strategic asset we have, but I think from a Marine Corps perspective, it certainly is. And then Paul Louis talks more about, kind of this littoral warfare concept and how we dominate the waters and airspace, right? Churchill called them triamphibious operations, land, sea, and air. And the Marine Corps and most of the world has gone with amphibious operations, just sea and land. But we have to be able to dominate the waters and the airspace, and that's a joint function. That's not just us. And you can add cyberspace, you can add the electromagnetic spectrum to those domains that we have to be able to dominate to project power from the sea. Whether that's for humanitarian purposes or for combat operations, we have to be able to dominate those things to do it safely. And I think part of our role as staff officers, part of our role as critical thinkers is to help figure out how we do that effectively. And then, we pull chapters out of the book and you can go, oh, well, there's a case study. Every time I read the book, I come across something new. Depending on which hat I have on, if I'm an editor, if I'm a staff planner, if I'm writing an exercise scenario, I'm going to pull that book off the shelf and I'm going to grab an exercise. If I'm running a TDG for a company commander, I'm going to do something else. So, again, hopefully this book advances that and gives folks an opportunity to think about how we project power from the sea.
Great. Well, no, I appreciate you kind of laying out the groundwork for how this thing whole got going. Before we get into the individual chapters here, for you and Brett, I kind of want to just dig a little bit deeper into what was your sort of your criteria or your weeding out process for what things you wanted to include and not include. I know you sort of mentioned in general you wanted to not just focus on the assault, but other aspects of amphibious operations. But in terms of winnowing down, what time period, what geographic regions. What was your decision-making process? Because obviously, you could write a book 5 times this thick and just talk about amphibious operations in World War II by itself, right? So, what was your thought process and your balance of things that went in and things that didn't go in?
Really, we were just looking for unique stuff. We're looking for we've been professionals in the amphibious warfare space for years. We were looking for a little bit of novelty, not reading about Tarawa or reading about Normandy for the, half of 6th time, 7th time. So we were lucky that we got our call for papers seemed to hit a nerve with people and sent us these very unique topics. Some people even said, I don't know where else to put this, but it fits with your call for papers. And I think we made it appropriately broad and made it appropriately focused on diversity that we were able to get a lot of really good responses. We didn't bound it by time or region whatsoever, except basically by negation, saying, let's focus on U.S. Marines and let's focus on World War II. Other than that, go crazy. And then we organized it into kind of historical case studies and future prognostications on where things could go. And that was really all we did category.
Okay, good. Tim, anything to add to that? No, Brett nailed it. Good, awesome. Okay, great. So now I want to turn over to our 2 chapter authors here, Sulakshana and Ellen. And we kind of went into your specialty backgrounds. I realized that with that very, very broad level of research and experience for both of you, I imagine it's hard to sort of winnow that down into one area of sort of amphibious perspective in your areas of expertise. But I kind of in general want to get into how did you, from your broad your background of expertise, how did you winnow it down and get into the specific thing you wanted to talk about in your individual chapter in the book?
Thank you. So I guess I'll start with you did kind of touch on my background. I'm a Middle East specialist, actually. And one thing I've noticed over the course of my career is that, so part of it is that I worked a lot with naval social warfare. And when you look at the Middle East through that lens, your focus is going to be almost exclusively on counterterrorism, on non-state actors, and on a lot of threats that are ground-based, right? And what's interesting is that over the course of that career, it's been overlaid with this top-down guidance over multiple administrations to start moving away from the counterterrorism effort and pivoting towards something more strategic. So, during the Obama administration, we had the pivot to the Pacific. Now, as that was starting to come into effect, ISIS made a resurgence in Iraq, and, we had to direct additional resources shortly after we had made the decision to pull out of there. So, my topic is kind of a natural evolution from the tension that has existed over the course of my 12-year now career, looking at CT and working with NSW in the context of trying to pull out of that and adapt to this completely different mission set. So it was just a natural fit. I started to think about, great power competition and how are we going to meet the requirements and demands of this completely different type of problem, and everybody is struggling with it who doesn't have a background in Russia or China. And I know for a fact that NSW is going to struggle with it as well. And so it was just kind of a natural evolution from there.
All right, thank you. And then Ellen, same question to you. How did you kind of narrow down to one topic for your chapter?
Well, I came into this chapter really as a regionalist, someone who focuses largely on Arctic studies. My primary research focus over the last 3 years has really been looking at Arctic governance from a really institutional point of view. Orrin Young, one of the longest tenured scholars in the field, I think said it best when he called the Arctic Governance Network a mosaic. And there's so many organizations and forums that try to govern the Arctic, the Arctic Council, the IMO, the International Arctic Forum, Nordic Council, and many more. But I think the thing that really defines the mosaic is that it's overwhelmingly concerned with establishing norms and standards about what's acceptable behavior in the far north, which to a degree makes sense because circumpolar indigenous nations play such active roles in Arctic governance, And so a system that relies on norms rather than hard-binding law advantages them. But it also means that there's a lot of leeway in how firmly states are constrained in what kind of military activity they feel comfortable engaging in up in the Arctic. And that means that in the scholarship on the Arctic, there's a lot of gaps in understanding how military action plays out in the Arctic. Because so many of these institutions and organizations explicitly reject addressing military operations or the potential of military operations from their purview, which is all to say that because of all the existing work out there by virtue of this self-selection bias of these institutions, there really isn't immediately going to be a discussion on military activity or security. But from recent events like the Vostok 2018 maneuvers, the 2015 visit of Russian Deputy Prime Minister to Svalbard, one of Norway's Arctic archipelages, without the knowledge of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and even the continued infrastructure development across the circumpolar north, not only in Russia but in the U.S. and Canada as well, has really shown that while there's a great deal of non-zero-sum cooperation in the Arctic, especially when it comes to research and cooperation and emergency preparedness and response, military application really is an issue that remains on the field for many Arctic states, if on the back burner, and if not something that's really on the forefront of the mind of the field. So really wanting to get in and explore some of these potentials in the future, because it's really not it's really agreed upon that at some point it is going to be militarily and economically feasible for there to be a larger presence in the Arctic, whether it's industry or military.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then so I want to go back to Sue, to your chapter here for a little bit. I think you noted how that tension between sort of what, aspirationally what naval special warfare wants to do and what it kind of keeps getting pulled back into doing, in what we would call, dirt debts or constant sort of ground coin-focused operations. Can you describe in your writing in the chapter and some of the other research you've done, what are some of the different sort of tool sets and changes in perspective that naval special warfare is going to have to either adopt or shift over to move from that sort of ground focus back to great power competition where naval and maritime amphibious operations are going to have a much larger role?
Sure. So I would say it's twofold. One is a policy shift that needs to happen. So that's beyond the scope of NSW, but I think that there is a lot of discussion that still needs to happen in terms of how to address threats that emanate from a non-state actor. How to address threats that emanate from a state actor. And so while we work on that, I think at the same time, NSW needs to get out of this paradigm that we've just talked about regarding coin and targeting and direct action operations. I think that a lot of that is actually it's a source of comfort because that process has been refined so well over the last 20 years, and it's come to define the way that it's how most people associate this community. That's what they associate it with. It's these sorts of operations. And when you actually look at the history of NSW, officially it began in 1962, but of course there are historical precursors going back to the Second World War. The vast majority of what NSW has done over its lifespan is amphibious. But now all of this familiarity has been bred with a completely different mission set. And I know in my own experience, I've just seen situations where people just want to get after it. And there are circumstances where getting after it is not necessarily the right thing to do. So it's a source of comfort, and it's going to just require everyone to start thinking much, much more creatively and hearkening back to some of the other types of mission sets that they used to do. And the other part of it is just the cultural aspect, because if you look back at operations like Earnest Will, the type of role that NSW played was not exactly a starring one. It was a support role. in order to facilitate a larger mission. Whereas now, when you think about something like the UBL, the Osama bin Laden raid, that was in and of itself the accomplishment. So there's just going to have to be a reckoning or reconciling with how the community views itself in terms of adding value to an operation. So it's just to kind of get out of that headspace of saying, we're the ones in charge, we're going to take care of this, and understanding that there are still very meaningful strategic missions that they can support, but they're going to support them and not necessarily take a leading role in them. So that's just a cultural issue that will take time to work out.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think that goes into sort of a cultural shift that I think on the Marine side we can agree the Commandant has been trying to get us to understand, which is, the Marines in the in our EABO concept and our refocus on South China Sea area, we're in support of the naval campaign. We're not the main effort anymore, and that can be a difficult pill to swallow for people who are used to being, the ones who are the main effort and always kind of get the most consideration. So I can definitely understand how the NSW might have that change too, because I know they think, they've done a lot of great stuff, and sometimes it's hard to move into the support role. Ellen, I want to take the next question back to you. You kind of mentioned there's that sort of that difference between a lot of the focus and the literature, and you said, and sort of the public discourse is the norms and standards of that are non-military up in the Arctic. But in a book about amphibious warfare, we're obviously talking about that sort of that thing that isn't talked about that much. But I think in your chapter, you also made the point that some countries up there are at least thinking or sort of gearing themselves for the military aspect. So do you think that does Russia have a big advantage in that? Have they been demonstrably thinking about the military considerations? Is that something that Canada and the United States and other Arctic countries need to start getting more aggressive and thinking about, or is perhaps is their public demonstration of interest, is it backed up necessarily by an actual capability or not?
Well, I definitely say that the military potential of the Arctic really came to the forefront of really the national community's attention in 2007. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what happened there. Russia planted a 1 meter high titanium Russian flag on the Lomonosov Ridge underneath the North Pole, 2.5 miles underneath the North Pole on the seabed. It was really a symbolic gesture to try to lay claim to all of the seabed resources. There's expected to be a tremendous amount of natural energy and oil resources in the north, and laying claim to the Lomonosov Ridge, which is something Russia has historically done, would really give them claim to a larger swath of these resources than they would currently have under international maritime law, exclusive economic zones. But that really brought to everyone's attention, even though it was a very rather performative gesture, Russian actual infrastructural capabilities and technological capabilities to be able to perform that kind of risky performance there. And even the last numbers that I'm familiar with are in 2018, but even then, Russia really outshadowed, in particular, the U.S. in terms of its infrastructure, because amphibious operations infrastructure, or even just transportation and telecommunications infrastructure, has to be so specifically tailored to the conditions of the far north. In 2018, Russia had added 4 new brigade combat teams to its Arctic division, 14 airfields, 16 deep water ports, and 40 icebreakers. And at that time, the U.S. had 1 working icebreaker. So there is this concerning discrepancy that people have been paying more attention to since that performance of the late 2000s. There has been, for sure, an increase in U.S. attention to turning to the Arctic. Its military applications really have been going hand in hand with the commercial applications, because a lot of that infrastructure can fulfill those dual purposes. But Canada, in particular, has been a really strong partner for the U.S. Since the mid-2000s, Canada has really had put forward its securing its northern sovereignty as one of the key tenets of its Arctic strategy documents, which most Arctic states will put out an Arctic strategy document every 2 years or so. Russia tends to be a bit of an outlier on that. I think they update theirs maybe every 7-8 years. But Canada has really talked about promoting its northern sovereignty as a member of the international community, as an independent nation, and as a North American partner to the U.S. Of course, this pillar of their Arctic strategy has received prompted some controversy from some rural communities in the north, particularly indigenous communities. There's some discussion about the indigenous populations in the far north kind of being used symbolically as part of this tenet, because a big part of U.S. and Canadian mentality is securing northern security, in part to protect our northern peoples, indigenous rural communities up in northern Canada and Alaska. That kind of discussion doesn't feature as heavily in Russian communications, but there definitely has been this strong shift within even the past decade of needing to bump up North American and transatlantic infrastructure to meet that's being developed in Russia.
Great, thank you. So my second to last question for all of you, and I'll start with the chapter authors here for Ellen and Sulakshana. What is the biggest lesson you want the readers to take away from your chapters? There's multiple different case studies in here. What's the one thing that you hope that people take away from your contribution here, whether they're Marines or other readers?
Thanks. So I would say, if you get nothing else from the chapter, just hopefully you take away the fact that what we understand of NSW in the modern day is very atypical for what they have been doing up until around the year 2000, and that their skill set far exceeds what you're seeing during the war on terror years. And the other part of it is that if we want to take the great power competition problem seriously, we really need to adapt our thinking, because the issue of amphibious warfare is going to become way more relevant as we start to confront these other adversaries. And I give some of those examples in my chapter. But that whole domain is going to become far more in play, and we need to really be creative, and we have to move away from the CT paradigm in order to confront it.
Sure, and while we're on that, if you want to take a minute or so and expand on some of those other things that NSW can do in great power competition, sort of beyond what we see in the Hollywood movies.
Absolutely. So some of the more notable, I think, and relevant skill sets that are applicable would certainly be building up foreign internal defense. So again, not really cool and movie-worthy, but really, really important is building up the capabilities of our partners to defend their own borders and their own sovereignty. Conducting special reconnaissance missions, collecting information is a huge, huge part of understanding the adversary. Sabotage operations may become more relevant and meaningful in the context of confronting, legitimate state actors. Intelligence collection, infill and exfil operations as well. We're going to need a broader tool set that allows for more discretion and for a more quiet and smaller footprint in order to influence and counter-influence some of these adversaries. So this is just a taste of some of the other toolkits or tools they can offer.
Great, thank you. And then Ellen, over to you for your chapter. What's one big thing you hope that the readership takes away from it?
Probably the number one thing would be that even though the possibility of Arctic amphibious operations is still a long vision issue, currently there's still a lot of sea ice, and that would make it present a huge challenge to effective amphibious operations. Even though it's a long issue, the reality is that the current realities of the Arctic is rapidly changing, and every year the degree of sea ice covering it diminishes. And while it may take a decade or two for the Arctic to be a truly viable field for amphibious operations, It will be. It's a very viable and one would even say ideal field for amphibious operations. We can see through operations like Vostok and Operation Trident that the great states are already preparing for that eventuality. It really is easy to practice deception in the Arctic, the kind of deception that really lends itself to these amphibious operations, while underscoring that the Arctic is an inhabited region with large populations of regional experts and being an ancestral homeland. It is a region that has tremendous telecommunication gaps, underdeveloped international monitoring presence. I mean, a presence that's so underdeveloped that it necessitated a treaty in 2011 to actually compel Arctic states to further develop emergency preparedness response. When it's hard to gather information to fact check, it's easy to practice deception. The old adage of trust but verify really finds itself in a sticky position when you're unable to complete that second step.
Great, thank you. And then back to Tim and Brett there. Aside from your bringing lesser known cases to light in your book here and sort of putting in a new spin on some of the well-known cases, what are you hoping the readership takes away from the collection you two and your authors have put together?
My big takeaway is generally that amphibious warfare is a lot more than just the amphibious assault, especially I think for Marines as we go through this force design effort. There's been a lot of criticism of some of the Commandant's plans, at least changing the identity of the Marine Corps. The identity of the Marine Corps is just simply not tied up with the amphibious assault. It's tied up with amphibious operations as a whole. And that's why I think chapters like Sue's and B.J. Armstrong's chapter in this book and his own book, Small Boats and Daring Men, which covers some of the naval irregular warfare during the American Revolution, is really important for various communities to understand just how broad the capabilities are of the naval services, not just the Marine Corps. And then taking on some of those more traditional missions are going to be more common in the future than we probably think.
All right. And Tim, how about you?
I'm with Brett. I think the key takeaway is that it is more than just kicking the door in and doing forcible entry. It's the NEOs, it's the irregular warfare, it's the evacuations, the humanitarian operations. That's, the 26th MEU goes out not with the task of kicking a door in, it goes out with that capability. And I think as planners and thinkers do this, it's about the amphibious capability versus the amphibious assault. And I hope the book provides a fair amount of examples of all the types of operations that are out there and things to think about, and that it's not just, rolling up on the beach in our Amtraks and punching someone in the face.
As much fun as that would be. So for all of you, what's the next project you all are working on, whether it covers down on the things we've talked about today or something else? And I guess for Tim and Brett, to you, can we expect a sequel to this one? Was there enough extra material out there for a volume 2 or maybe even 3? We
might have sent Angela Anderson at Marine Corps University Press an email last week talking about a second volume. We might have.
Yeah, we're early in the process on that. Hopefully we can get a second volume. So we'll see. We think this has been pretty successful so far, so hopefully we can use that to keep this thing going. As for me, my next book on operations comes out this fall, 2021, from Naval S2E6 Press. Yeah, great. And as I'm thinking out loud here, maybe at some point we need to get you on to talk about your tactics and operations, and then maybe when you do your own non-strategy, we can do a trilogy. And then for Ellen and Sue, back to both of you, let us know what our audience can look forward to from you next, whether it's on this topic or something else.
So for me, I'm just in the brainstorming stage at the moment, but I'm very interested in exploring a little bit more on civil-military relations and public perceptions of the military, and just kind of digging into that for now, but we'll see.
I'm working on a book project. Brett mentioned it, I think, before we started recording, with Walker Mills, who's on right now. He and I are doing a volume tentatively entitled Armies in Retreat, and we're in the peer review stage of that right now. And then starting in April, I'm teaching a course at MCU on the distance program on the evolution of the U.S. Army from Vietnam to Desert Storm. So come sign up and learn about air-land battle and great power competition in the 1980s.
Oh, great. I'm sure us at MCU look forward to seeing that distance program when it's offered, and we'll help share it. And for your Armies in Retreat, is that Marine Corps University Press as well?
Likely not. We're talking to a publisher as is. We can't officially say that they're going to say yes because it's got to go through their intake process, but it will be somebody else who publishes books for free. So the readers won't have to go out and spend their hard-earned money to learn about losing.
Yeah, or no one says no to free stuff. All right, so Ellen, I'll let you have the last word. What's the next thing that you're working on?
I'm working on a book manuscript looking at the Arctic Council, probably the biggest organization in that Arctic mosaic I mentioned, and its history since its founding in 1996, and how the Arctic states have worked with indigenous circumpolar nations to implement some of the first regional binding agreements in there. It has some interesting connections to Russia as well. Back in 2012, the Russian government actually tried to shut down the organization that represented its indigenous peoples in the international forum, and it was actually forced to close for 6 months after the big international backlash against Russia. But looking at that, continuing on in the region.
Oh, great. No, I look forward to reading that as well once it's published. Okay, that takes us down to about an hour here, so we'll close out, and I'll say, first of all, thank you to all of our contributors here for, again, Marine Corps University Press's Uncontested Shores, available for free. The price is right from Marine Corps University Press, and you can also download it off the Marine Corps University Press website as a PDF. And for the Brewcast here this week, for all of you who joined us in the audience, thanks for your time. We'll have this posted on our YouTube and podcast channels here in the next few days. If you want to listen again or share it out with some other parties who couldn't join us today. And we will be off next week for some training on the range. But join us back here on March 8th for yet another panel discussion where we'll be offering our third episode in the Regaining the Strategic Initiative series that we started with the late Art Corbett's Military Innovator's Dilemma and followed up with our panel on the South China Sea a couple of weeks ago. This panel will feature, again, it'll be chaired by Dr. Leslie Wilhelm, and we'll be joined by Mr. Hunter Stiers and Dr. James Holmes. And Dr. Holmes is the co-author of Red Star Over the Pacific, China's Rise and the Challenge to U.S. Maritime Strategy, which, apart from being an excellent look at the rise in strategic outlook of the Chinese naval arm, is also on the Commandant's reading list as well. So we're very happy to have an author from that list on there to join us and talk about it. So thank you again, and we'll see you all then.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.